Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar on global expansion. We're just going to let everyone filter in for a few minutes. We've got a poll in the chat with 2 questions. If you would like to answer them to give us a little bit more insight into where you're at, that'd be great. The 2 questions are, if you've expanded overseas already, which countries have you expanded into? And the secondary question is, if you're interested in global expansion in the future, which countries would you be looking to expand into? So we'd really love you to answer one of those questions to give us a little bit more insight into where you're at today. We're just letting everyone filter in for a few minutes. So welcome if you've joined in the past minute or so. We've just got a poll that we're getting people to answer with 2 questions. 1 if you're already expanded overseas, and 1 if you're looking to expand in the future. So we'd love it if you would answer that question for us to give us some insight into where you are today. We're just going to give everyone 1 more minute to filter in before we begin. Okay, perfect. If anyone wants to do that poll during the webinar, then we really appreciate your feedback. But for now, let's get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on the topic of going global with Giant Payroll. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Giant Group, a leading contingent workforce management company for 30 years. Over the next 40 minutes or so, we'll focus on the opportunities businesses have to scale globally, as well as discussing the technical and compliance challenges businesses need to be aware of. We expect you to have some questions, so please use the Q&A function at the top of your screens, and we'll try our best to address as many as possible at the end. The areas we're going to cover today include EoR and AoR Solutions with EoR focus, global expansion opportunities, what the hot topics are when we're currently engaging with clients, risk and compliance in supply chain solutions, Giant global solutions and capabilities, and then finally we'll end with that question and answer session. Our keynote speakers today are Michael Howard, Head of Agency Sales here at Giant Group. Michael has worked in the industry for over 14 years, helping agencies navigate through a variety of legislation changes to ensure compliance and maintain profitability. Michael heads up our agency sales team to ensure our recruitment partners have access to the full range of Giant Group services. We're also joined today by Thomas Williams, our Key Account Director at Giant. For the last 5 years, Tom has been supporting our key agency partners to manage their contingent workforce with Giant's range of payroll solutions, whilst ensuring the recruitment supply chain stays compliant and efficient. The format today will be for Michael and Tom to address several set questions which I'll put to them in order to give us a full view from a business perspective. There'll be an opportunity for me to give them your questions at the end too, so remember to be using that Q&A function as we go through this session. Michael, good afternoon. We'll come to you first. Please, can you explain to us the acronyms EoR and AoR specifically when used for global payroll?
Hi, Betty. Hi, everyone. I suppose it'd be important for us just to sort of take a step back and go back to basics here and look at the UK and give a bit of a high-level overview over here, first of all. Has there been regular legislation updates, policy reviews from the government to ensure that compliance is adhered to? Most recently, the news last month regarding the umbrella consultation. However, when you look at something similar overseas, this is very much the opposite. A number of years ago, having global payroll capabilities were very sought after due to its technicalities and local social security requirements. And this meant supply chains were very, what's the word, relaxed, very different, and a number of structures were in place to help support workers getting paid. Fast forward to the here and now, and I think the world has definitely changed a lot over the last couple of years. The world of remote working has definitely become increased, and therefore working overseas has definitely seen an increase. More and more business goals are to help accelerate the profitability and sales, and being able to replicate what they do here in the UK to have a much wider global reach. Giant Group, as Betty mentioned earlier, have got 30 years worth of providing UK payroll solutions, as well as a suite of services to complement businesses, including screening, finance, technology. But we're also very proud to have our global payroll solutions help to our existing partners, but also welcome any new suppliers to Giant. Going back to acronyms earlier on, Giant have got EoR, Employee of Record, and AoR, Agent of Record, payroll capabilities currently across 4 continents with a reach of over 40 countries, allowing for Giant to be a payroll partner of choice to many businesses we work with today. To put simply, EoR, Employer of Record, is when the workers are engaged on what we class as the equivalent over here in a UK model on a PAYE/umbrella model. This is whereby Giant would become the employer of record, and Giant are able to provide this due to our network of legal entities we have globally, helping to meet the demands of the businesses we speak with on a daily basis. With this model and setup, we are registered in the country, allowing Giant to make local social security payments at source, which will ensure the workers receive their net payments post deductions. Additionally, Giant have also a number of engagements that are set up with where we are acting as the agent of record. And this is the equivalent over here in the UK for those that are looking at expanding globally as a self-employed/limited company engagement. This is where Giant would sit in the supply chain and make gross payments to the worker, where they can then facilitate their own taxes at the end of the year locally. Very similar to that over here in the UK. Certain countries have their own nuances and technical requirements, which is why it's important Giant can both support AoR and EoR payroll solutions to relevant businesses and workers.
Thanks, Michael, for explaining that. We're going to bring Tom in at this point. Could you tell us currently why we're seeing a draw towards this global expansion within the industry, and why do you think this is?
Yeah, thanks, Betty. Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's increasingly topical at the moment, especially with the ongoing challenges at the UK at the moment, and several of our key agency partners and SME clients are delving into global markets, and the conversation around global payroll and employed solutions is definitely becoming more topical currently. From the outside, global expansion can seem costly, complex, and somewhat time-consuming, and maybe a scary thought for some people. But if you're able to leverage self-employed and employed solution and the backing of a robust technological system, it'll mean that transition to global expansion will be much more attractive. Why do I think that's the case? As we know that the UK is heavily saturated marketplace, and the ongoing challenges that I mentioned and might mention about the cost of living and political instability, etc., is definitely drawing people away from the UK, alongside the huge potential of exponentially growing agencies who now recruit international markets. With the technology in place, you're able to start placing international employees and self-employed workers straight away. And the new way of thinking could significantly open a large amount of doors as well. As Mike mentioned and briefly touched on, Giant are able to support with Giant Global International Payroll Solutions, now operating in 4 different continents and over 40 different countries, including the likes of the US, Poland, Ireland, and the Netherlands. And something a key focus of ours is to continue growing that portfolio, expanding into more countries between now and the end of the year.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom. And then if that's the case, what are the benefits that can come alongside global expansion?
Yeah, thanks, Betty. So I think the main one we all know is the revenue streams and the ability to increase new streams to the business, especially with that the UK is saturated as it is. And there's huge untapped potential across the globe. That when I've been speaking to my key clients, is the potential is so vast in comparison to the UK, and the fact there is lower competition in countries, which provides a huge competitive advantage as well for companies who are trialing international recruitment. And it also enables the agency to diversify the business and not be over reliant on the UK recruitment space. One of the other benefits is access to new talent, and expanding abroad offers the opportunity to recruit international talent, which can bring specialised knowledge and skills for essential for the growth in that market. Generally, what we find is local hires can provide critical insights and deeper understanding of the market and they're recruiting in, and they tend to have multilingual capabilities and unique perspectives to enhance the company and innovation within that company as well. Brand recognition is a big one, and in my opinion, one of the most important aspects of a business, and establishing that global brand in international markets can strengthen reputation with future clients, investors and customers as well, and being associated with a global brand is ever more important now. You also spreading your risk, expanding into multiple countries, diversify the market risks, and as I mentioned, economic downturns, political instability and maybe other adverse conditions in one region might negatively impact the business, but having operations in other more stable countries can definitely mitigate them effects. And lastly, it's regarding service offerings for clients. And as we all know, the space of recruitment is heavily led by client requirements, and the ability to be adaptable with recruitment is essential, whilst also accessing new talent across the globe and being able to take advantage of opportunities set by clients to recruit in international markets. And crucially, having the backing of a global provider to help with payroll will definitely be an interesting proposition for the future.
Thanks so much for that, Tom. A quick reminder to the audience at this point, please feel free to use the Q&A function and we'll try and get around to as many of your questions at the end as possible. So, Michael, when you are meeting with businesses at the moment, what are the hot topics that are repeatedly coming up?
Thanks, Betty. I think I concur with Tom. The number one discussion points that I'm having with business stakeholders, owners, directors of businesses that I'm meeting with is, how can we get a foothold in the global marketplace? Which obviously helps from a Giant perspective, as we're very happy to assist with our range of services. Whether you're a large, medium or small business, some of those on this webinar today, I suppose, one of your annual goals is to increase profits, and a way of helping to accelerate this is to replicate what you do in the UK, but also do this globally. Giant have got the technology, experience and expertise to be able to help businesses scale quickly by supporting them on this topic. Whether it be with an existing UK client that has a global entity, or whether it be a new client or new client proposition which may be based overseas, we are able to support on both requirements. Due to our presence and global network reach, which I've mentioned previously, specifically in the EoR and AoR engagements, we're able to ensure our fundamental services, which have been provided successfully here in the UK for the last 30 years, is replicated to those that need the support globally. With Giant having a number of global legal entities, this allows us to ensure that we are the company not only you, the agency, for the people that are on the webinar today, are dealing with directly, but also your contingent workers are getting paid from directly without the need in most cases for a local payroll partner in that specific country. This allows for a greater level of compliance throughout the supply chain, but also ensuring the workers receive as much money as they can, with our competitive margins and structure ensuring that there's only Giant in between the intermediary and the worker, rather than local payroll partners and other companies which usually envisage a margin on top. Giant's legal entities are set up across a number of continents and countries. However, if there is a project, if there is a requirement for workers that you need our support where we currently don't have a legal entity, we do also have a network of partners globally to try and help support you from an immediate solution perspective. Due to our in-depth team of specialists, where we need to, we can ensure that there is an immediate setup for you for any types of payroll requirements. Today, there are a number of companies that are providing global payroll solutions. As we've discussed over the last 15 or 20 minutes, more and more businesses are now going and wanting to expand globally. So the demand and the need for this type of service has increased. Giant uses its own intellectual property. So we're not using a third-party provider. We're not using third-party software. We're not using companies outside of the UK. We are using Giant's own intellectual property. On top of that, we're also the employer of record in 35, 40 different global countries, which allows us to ensure that we've got capabilities to provide our streamlined automated payroll technology. We are in a very unique position here. While there are other global firms that some of you on this webinar may well be engaging with at the moment, a number of them, based on our research, form part of a larger group where systems may have challenges in terms of engagement with one another, or you may have frustrations with certain solutions when working more efficiently than others. With Giant, whether it's an EoR in Ireland or an AoR in India, Giant will be able to provide agency partners and businesses the same global consistent process to support all of your contingent workers.
Thank you for that, Michael. Then coming back to you for a final question, Tom, the risks and compliance requirements that businesses should be aware of when scaling globally, what do those look like?
Yeah, thanks, Betty. So it is again echoing what Mike said, and just to build upon that is with recruitment and how it's changing constantly. Risk and compliance and keeping things streamlined is always #1 priority, and ensuring that the transparency and clarity across the supply chain is tremendously important. If you compare both options, whether it's UK or international risk and compliance, there are some similarities across the supply chain. One being the debt transfer risk. And again, it's crucially important to make sure you're working with a compliant payroll provider, whether they're supporting with umbrella, PAYE, self-employed, limited, or any other payroll methods. Like in the UK, it's the same for international, but if the payroll company isn't making the correct deductions when processing the worker's payroll, there could be huge financial penalties and implications to follow. And if the government complete an investigation and it finds the payroll company aren't making the correct deductions and therefore can't pay the fines or potentially go bust, there's a debt transfer risk up the supply chain. So if the payroll company can't pay, it will then be the recruitment company's responsibility to pay the fines and the extra deductions that may be applicable. One way to mitigate this is to make sure when you are selecting payroll companies is the payroll company has sufficient accreditations. It's important to do regular payslip audits, whether that's on a monthly or quarterly basis, and to ensure that the payroll company has a proven track record of staying compliant as well. Another one of the risks to consider is regarding legislation within different countries. A complete contrast to the UK, where one of the biggest challenges when recruiting local talent is multiple countries will also have to consider different countries' legislation. There isn't just one country to understand. Each individual country has different employment and tax legislations to consider. Just a bit of context on that point. For example, if you're working in Germany and you want to engage in self-employed, you have to have multiple clients, hold your own insurances, and have a website advertising your services as a freelancer. Otherwise, you'd be classed as an employee in the deemed category and have to go through an employed solution. To ensure compliance on our side, we would carry out our own questionnaire to understand the nature of the role and to make sure it's suitable for the contractor to engage self-employed, and this just provides some protection across the supply chain and leaves much less risk of reclassification. It's also important to note that the best and most effective solution potentially is to partner with a trusted provider of expertise to speak to you and contractors directly, whether it's the implications of take-home pay or any questions or queries that are applicable for each country that you are recruiting. Also, things to consider are things like employment risk and dealing with international markets when offered employed solution, like Mike mentioned before. EoR is definitely something to consider as well. To put some context on that point, in the US, they have both federal taxes and state taxes, and each individual state has different tax and labour laws. It's essentially 50 different rules, 50 different states, and a good solution for that is, again, Mike touched on, is partnering with a company who offers employer of record, meaning the payroll company handles all the employment legislation and rules along with that. The EoR solution would provide a mix of insurances. They would also manage the holiday pay process and make the relevant pension contributions as well. And lastly is regarding the system, and in my opinion, rather than having multiple international payroll providers, it would make sense to have everything in one place. And as we know, the international world is very complex, and having a system that's flexible and robust enough to handle the complexities is really important. A possible solution for that is in relation to processing payroll, and to ensure the systems are capable in processing payroll in different countries, and ensure you're working with a company who has the capabilities of onboarding, timesheet process, paying bill system, screening software, meaning essentially the turnaround time's quick to get the person at work, and essentially the candidates are paid on time as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tom. And finally, Michael, can I come to you to explain Giant Global solutions and capability when it comes to supporting this topic?
Yeah, thanks, Betty. Thanks, Tom. I suppose for everybody that's on the webinar today, clearly there's an interest. There's either a current or a prospective engagement globally. What that doesn't just mean is that we tick a box and we look at overseas payroll mechanics, whether that's EoR or AoR that we spoke about. There is so much more to engaging with workers, contingent supply chains abroad. And this topic, I'm going to explain a little bit more about what makes Giant a unique proposition and a different solution to others maybe that you've either currently speaking with or engaged with. So I suppose whether it's a permanent or a contingent recruitment background or placement that you're looking at filling, a big focus on requirement from the clients, which has definitely been on the increase over the last number of years, is the pre-screening and background checks for these workers that are being placed. Especially even more required with the global world of work we live in today. So yes, I think there's quite a number of screening and background businesses that can support UK placements. It's not so much widespread for businesses being able to complete these pre-screening and background checks globally. However, with Giant, as we've all mentioned, Tom and I, over the past 25-30 minutes, we are in a fortunate position that we do cover a wide range of solutions. Giant Screening are very proud to ensure that we are supporting clients. Not only can we screen UK workers, but we have the capability and solutions to vet and complete background checks of workers around the world too, putting us in a hugely unique position in the global marketplace. Speaking with and meeting with a number of businesses over the past couple of months, they do tend to have a UK preferred partner, UK PSL partners. They've also sourced and gained specialist global payroll partners. And they've also got separately a global screening partner. With Giant, you have got access to all of the above and more, which allows for one partner of choice for you, for those that are on the webinar, when it comes to contingent workforce global requirements. Additionally, the support we provide to workers with reference to the EoR and AoR payroll solutions, we are working with a number of businesses and MSPs, some of those that are on the webinar today, who have global clients, where we are providing a consultative audit piece as part of a wider solution, which has complemented the relationship we have with these businesses. The audits we've carried out have resulted in a number of businesses reducing the risk in the supply chain, usually the client and/or the MSP, while increasing volume and engagement via a compliant payroll solution, allowing for the client to build further trust in their partner and/or managed service partner. Giant are also capable of providing margin-only solutions globally. Again, the fundamental benefit of Giant encompassing a wide range of solutions, allowing us to support MSPs, consultancy firms, global partners that need a global requirement. Utilising not only global payroll, but also the audit review, worldwide screening capabilities and margin-only payments to second-tier agencies, all using Giant's very own intellectual property, which makes us as a unique partner to work with on all things global. I'll just share an example of a meeting I had with a client about 4 weeks back. For those that are looking at how we can maybe use an example of how Giant could support. They were an MSP. They held the MSP for a UK client where there was several hundred contractors that they were supporting. There was a number of second-tier agencies, but majority were going through the MSP. The client was a global partner, and they had another couple of hundred workers that were outside of the MSP that were engaged via a overseas, 5 or 6 different overseas recruitment agencies. Giant were in a position where we were able to audit all of them workers that were paid globally to be able to put a RAG status of red, amber, green. We were also in a position where we could provide margin only service for the client and the MSP so that the second tier agencies would receive margin only payments rather than sit in the supply chain. And based on the results of the audit, we also then ensured that the workers who were on a yellow or a red engagement model were paid via Giant's EoR or AoR payroll capabilities. And what that resulted in was more and more throughput through the MSP, much lower risk, much lower level of concern from a client and an MSP perspective, but also an enhanced level of credibility and compliance for the contractual supply chain. So I just wanted to share that with you all on the webinar, is that, you know, global expansion can be very technical, can be very challenging, but if there's ever a situation whereby you're unsure on how Giant could potentially help or add any value to you as a business, you know, Tom, myself and the wider Giant sales team are more than happy to help support any questions you may have on our global capability and reach.
Thank you so much to both of you for your insights over the last half an hour or so into something a number of businesses are looking or have started to explore already. And hopefully today, to our audience, you've learned a lot about the global opportunities that currently exist. We have received a few questions, so as promised, let's spend some time having a look at these. So I've had 2 questions that have some similar elements, so I'm just going to ask them both, and then Michael, if you can pick up on this. So we've got a first question, which was, Giant was a UK-focused payroll provider. How long have we been working internationally, and how many countries are we covering? And secondary to that, we've got someone else who said, how many countries can we support for EoR? How many countries does Giant have its own entities in? And also they've said it would be really good to understand our EoR rates, which I'm guessing is something we can probably pick up with that person after the webinar. But yeah, could you give us some insight into those questions, please?
Yeah, thanks, Betty. Thanks very much for the points raised. So I'll try and go through them point by point. So how many countries can you support for EoR? We are currently the employer of record in between 30 and 35 countries globally. We are continually growing our EoR base. The way in which we started our progress was we generally started with Netherlands and Ireland because we know that they're quite busy in certain sectors. And we've got a list of countries in which we know are typically busy from a global contingent marketplace perspective. However, if anybody on this webinar, or if there's a project that came on board and they said they needed 5, 10 or 15 workers in, let's say Austria, for example, and we don't have an EoR at that moment, we would move that up the list and get an EoR set up in that place. So we're kind of very reactive to what the audience wants to look at. In terms of EoR rates, it's very similar to that of the UK. The payments are always billable and taken from the worker's assignment income. So the flow down of funds would go from client to agency, agency to Giant Global. Giant Global would then deduct the local social security taxes and retain our margin, and then we pay the worker locally into their personal bank account. Each country will have its own level of retention rates based on local social security rates, and also that comes with very different rates of retained margin that we have. It will be try and be as similar as it possibly can be, because our processes are very aligned and very similar, but each country is different. So we do have a matrix globally that we can share with you in terms of what the cost will be for the worker, but also what level of retention rate the worker would likely take to take home. I think there was one more question that you mentioned, Betty. Giant was a UK focused payroll for how long have you been working internationally and how many countries are you covering? So yeah, 35 countries currently providing services to. In terms of how long we've been working internationally, we've actually been payrolling workers internationally for 12 years. It wasn't something that we wanted at that time to get too heavily invested in, because as you can imagine, it's a very technical, and going back to my very first part on this webinar, there was very little known compliance back in the day. We have payrolled workers in Netherlands for probably 12 years through a couple of our key agency partners. I suppose if we move fast forward and sort of understand when Giant Global got launched, I think we've probably been supporting workers into that market for about 2 years now. But we've had a really strong push over the last 6 to 12 months in terms of that reach expanding and our network of partners increasing. But in terms of the capabilities, because I keep going on about our own intellectual property that we use, we've been able to payroll overseas workers for the last 10, 12 years.
Amazing. Thank you so much for answering that question. One more question has just come through, which is, do we provide EoR and AoR services in the Middle East and Africa?
I suppose the answer is yes. We'll obviously have to, have a look at the specifics in terms of the country and the specific residence of where the worker is. Again, going back to the previous point, if we need to open up and employ a legal entity in that specific country, we will. If we can't, or it's too short notice, then we do have a global network partners that are already locally based that we can support and pass you on to. So I think for the person who's just asked that question, Betty, we can definitely follow up with the current list of global countries we engage with. And if we need to follow up further after that to support any opportunities, we'd be more than happy to do so.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. And then I've just got one final question. I'm going to come to you, Tom, with this one. So we're aware that depending on the continent, the country, the region, there can be different legislations and different requirements in terms of global expansion. So how can Giant support for that?
Yeah, thanks, Betty. So yeah, as Mike mentioned, in terms of we're set up in multiple different countries as legal entities, but if not, we can always refer to our trusted local partners within that specific country as well. And as Mike mentioned, we've been running payroll for multiple of our key agencies for the last 12 years, and for anything that crops up in terms of whether it's risk, whether it's compliance, whether it's process or general queries, we're always here to help. We've got myself and Mike on our team, but we also have a specific Giant Global team to also deal with you guys as well. So multiple point of contacts to reach out to. So yeah, any specific questions that you do have, happy to reach out to either of us.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I think I'm just a little bit conscious of time, so we're going to wrap up for today. But thank you so much to everyone who's joined us on this webinar, and thank you to our two experts also for joining us today. We'll be following up with an email containing the recording and a quick feedback questionnaire tomorrow, so you can watch this again, or you can give us some valuable feedback so that we can keep doing better for you each and every time. If you have any specific questions, please follow up with the contact details we'll provide afterwards. We'd love to chat to you. But thank you again from Michael, Tom and me. If you need help with planning for these potential changes and to discuss these options, again, please get in touch. But thanks for today and have a great rest of your days.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.